President Trump giving an update on the American Armada heading to Iran and how a nuclear deal is progressing.
We have a large armada, flotilla, you can call it whatever you want, heading toward Iran right now, even larger than what we had in Venezuela. Hopefully we'll make a deal. If we do make a deal, that's good. If we don't make a deal, we'll see what happens.
Are you giving Iran any kind of deadline to make a deal before potentially taking
Only they
action?
know for sure. We'll see how it all works out. You know, they have to float someplace. They might as well float near Iran.
This as a senior Gulf official reveals to Fox News that the Saudis won't let the U.S. use its bases or airspace for an attack on Iran. Steve Yates is a former deputy national security advisor for Vice President Cheney. He was part of President George Bush's national security team that focused on Saddam Hussein and Osama bin Laden, and joins us now. So, Steve, thank you for joining us this morning. Great to have you. In terms of this armada, when will this armada be in place to be effective for whatever is going to possibly happen?
Well, part of it has been in place all along, and I think you alluded to some of the other pieces that were less mobile that have been available. The bases in the region, the United States has fairly substantial bases around the Gulf, and of course the maximum pressure campaign that people may have heard of over the years to try to contain the malign influences of Iran have been there for some time. Moving what we call now the Armada over, I think actually expands the president's option set. It deals with any regional allies that might talk about not being permissive with airspace or other kind of movement of forces, so that the president can have his maximum pressure, get at the ghost fleet that hits the energy markets that have helped Iran bust sanctions in the past. It affects China a lot since it's a primary customer of Iranian oil. And so it helps increase the pressure to bring them to the negotiating table. And I basically expect that this is what the president's plan A is, to contain the malign influences, pressure the regime to come to the table to make a deal. But he's proven willing that if they move too far too fast in nuclear or other areas, he will strike, then probably pull back and see whether they've changed their mind.
What do you think is the full range of options, given that I think we've all kind of learned that getting into wars is not doesn't work out very well?
It doesn't, but I think that any responsible national security leader has to be prepared in case there's retaliation that expands the mission and the scope. And so I think that the president has plenty of options that would be prepared for things like that. But I expect that they'll look at hitting facilities that are of concern, as they did before, hopefully again by stealth, reminding people there are things that only America can do, and there's really nothing you can do about it, so make your deal. There are other things they could do to affect energy and infrastructure, but also really enhance communication. One of the disturbing things in the recent protests were that the regime seemed more capable of blocking communication, even with Starlink coming into the mix. Hopefully we're increasing our options there so the people have more power to shape their future.
It does seem like that's one of the only things they're really effective at. What about, if you talk privately to the Saudis will tell you that Iran is their biggest headache, and yet they don't want to cooperate with in terms of allowing their airspace or bases to be used. What is the game they're playing right now?
Well, Saudi is an ally that can move, especially under its current leadership, back and forth. In general, they have negotiated things that have been more or less win-win in recent times. Of course, the president had a very successful visit or two with them, with significant investment coming to the United States as a consequence. And so we hope this might be temporary, but they have squabbles with their neighbors, even among the Arab states that are part of this maximum pressure to contain Iran's malign influences. So I think it's driven more by internal and interregional politics at the moment, but push comes to shove, Saudi Arabia and the Arab allies are a counter to the Persian Empire that's been hijacked by this theocratic regime.
Steve Yates, always appreciate your wisdom. Thank you.
I'm Steve Doocy.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.